My new boss publicly humiliated me, manipulating data to paint my successful team as failures. He thought I was just a quiet middle manager. He didn't know I wrote the contracts he was violating, so I triggered a legal audit that ended his career. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious, where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The room was spinning before Kyle Weston even clicked to the next slide. I had been fighting a migraine all morning, the kind that starts at the base of the skull and claws its way behind the eyes, making the fluorescent lights of the boardroom feel like interrogators' lamps. I was already physically drained, running on 3 hours of sleep after pulling an all-nighter to prep for this very quarterly review. I was vulnerable, my defenses down, expecting, at worst, a boring recap of a steady quarter. I wasn't prepared for an execution. Transparency, Weston said. He loved that word. He chewed on it, savoring the syllables as if he were the first person to ever introduce the concept of honesty to business. Transparency is about facing the hard truths. He clicked the remote. The screen behind him, which usually displayed the steady, green upward trends of my client success department, was suddenly awash in aggressive red. As you can see, Weston continued, his voice smooth and practiced, the product of an expensive Ivy League education and 0 years in the trenches, the legacy accounts are bleeding. Under the new performance definitions I've implemented, the client success team isn't just stagnating. They are actively costing us potential revenue. The air left the room. I felt the blood drain from my face, a cold sweat pricking at my hairline. I looked around the table. The marketing director stared at her notepad. The VP of sales shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my gaze. They knew, they had to know this was wrong. My team hadn't lost a single major client in 5 years. We were the bedrock this company stood on. Kyle, I managed to say, my voice raspy. I tried to stand, but a wave of nausea forced me to grip the armrests of my chair. Those numbers, that's not accurate. We're at 98% retention. Weston didn't even turn to look at me fully. He just gave a slight, pitying tilt of his head, addressing the room rather than me. This is exactly what I mean about legacy thinking. We can't rely on outdated metrics to make us feel good, Adam. We need to look at value-add velocity. And frankly, your team is flatlining. We need to realign the entire department. He looked at me then, a small, tight smile playing on his lips. It wasn't a smile of leadership. It was the smile of a predator who knows the prey is already wounded. Next time, Adam, he said, loud enough for the assistants in the hallway to hear, make sure your numbers align with reality before you come to a meeting. It's embarrassing for everyone. The humiliation was physical. It hit me harder than the migraine. I sat there paralyzed as he moved on to the next slide, erasing 10 years of my life's work with a single manipulated spreadsheet. The betrayal was worse than the diagnosis itself. The walk back to my office felt like a funeral procession of one. The hallway, usually a place where people would stop me to ask for advice or chat about a client, felt like a gauntlet. People ducked into their cubicles as I passed. In the corporate world, the scent of blood in the water is unmistakable, and Weston had just cut me open for everyone to see. I closed my office door and sank into my chair, the leather creaking under my weight. My hands were trembling. I wasn't sure if it was rage or shock. Ping! My inbox lit up. Rough meeting, man, hang in there. Don't let him get to you, he's just shaking things up. The messages of support felt hollow. They were condolences. They were the kind of things you say to a man you know is already a walking ghost. They didn't understand. This wasn't just a rough meeting. This was a calculated dismantling. Weston hadn't just changed the font on a PowerPoint. He had retroactively applied new metrics to old work to manufacture a failure where there wasn't one. I rubbed my temples, trying to push back the throbbing headache. I needed water. I needed to think. I stepped out to the break room, and that's when I saw him. Weston was by the espresso machine, laughing with one of the junior analysts. He looked perfectly at ease, his suit unwrinkled, his posture relaxed. He saw me come in, and the laughter didn't stop, but his eyes went cold. Adam, he said, nodding briefly, hope you're not taking the data personally. It's just business. We have to trim the fat if we want to soar. Trim the fat, that's what I was to him. Not the man who saved the draconian Johnson account 3 years ago, not the man who stayed late every Christmas Eve to ensure the servers didn't crash for the overseas clients. Just fat to be trimmed. I'm not taking it personally, Kyle, I lied, my voice steady despite the pounding in my head. I'm just interested in the methodology. It's complex, he said dismissively, grabbing his cup. Data science isn't for everyone, just focus on whatever it is you do day to day. Let me handle the strategy. He walked out, leaving me standing there with the hum of the refrigerator and the boiling rage in my gut. He thought he had won. He thought he had crushed the old guard. But as I watched him strut down the hallway, a thought flickered in the back of my mind, cutting through the migraine fog. It was a memory from years ago, late at night, drafting the initial enterprise agreements with the legal team. Weston saw numbers, he saw spreadsheets, but he didn't know the history. He had forgotten one crucial thing: I didn't just manage the accounts. I had built the rules he was currently breaking. To understand why this hurt so much, you have to understand who I was to this company. I wasn't the flashy sales guy ringing the gong. I wasn't the visionary CEO giving interviews to TechCrunch. I was the senior client success manager. I was the guy who fixed things. For 10 years, I was the first one in and the last one out. When the company pivoted 3 times, I was the one who smoothed it over with our long-term clients, convincing them to stay when they had every right to leave. I had missed anniversaries. I had answered calls during my daughter's piano recitals. I had sacrificed my personal life on the altar of this company's stability because I believed in it. I believed that if you were steady, reliable, and effective, you were safe. Then came Kyle Weston. He arrived 2 months ago, fresh from a stint at a high-frequency trading firm, wearing his arrogance like a badge of honor. He was younger than me by 15 years, with a resume that looked perfect on paper and a personality that was toxic in practice. From day one, he made it clear that he viewed the company's culture not as an asset, but as an inefficiency. He didn't learn names, he learned titles. He didn't ask how things worked, he asked how much they cost. We need to disrupt ourselves before the market disrupts us, he had said in his introductory town hall, using so many buzzwords I thought he was speaking a different language. I had tried to welcome him. I sat down with him in his first week, offering to walk him through the client histories to explain the nuances of our service-level agreements. He had checked his watch 3 times during that meeting. "That's all very interesting, Adam," he had said, cutting me off mid-sentence. "But I'm not interested in how we used to do things. I'm interested in optimization and looking at your team. You guys seem very comfortable. Comfort is the enemy of growth." I should have known then. He was the classic slash-and-burn executive. He wanted a quick win to put on his CV so he could jump to a CEO role somewhere else in 2 years. He didn't care if he burned the house down, as long as he could sell the ashes for a profit. Now, sitting in my office after the humiliation in the boardroom, I realized his plan wasn't just about optimization. It was about replacing the expensive, tenured staff with cheaper, inexperienced hires he could mold. He was going to fire me. He was just building the paper trail to make it look like performance issues so he wouldn't have to pay out my severance. I looked at the photo of my daughter on my desk. I thought about the tuition bills coming up. I thought about the 10 years of loyalty I had given this place. Weston wanted a war. He thought I was just a dinosaur waiting for the meteor. He was about to find out that dinosaurs have teeth. I didn't go home. I couldn't. The image of that red slide was burned into my retinas, a brand of failure I didn't deserve. The office emptied out around 6:00 p.m., the chatter of the sales team fading into the hum of the HVAC system. By 7:30 p.m., the floor was silent, save for the rhythmic thrum-thrum of the cleaning crews vacuumed down the hall. I sat in the dark, the blue light of my monitor the only illumination. I wasn't sulking anymore, I was hunting. I navigated to the archived server drives, the deep storage that guys like Weston didn't even know existed. He lived in the cloud, in the flashy dashboards of the present. I lived in the bedrock of the past. I began pulling up the original master service agreements, MSAs, from the company's foundational years. My eyes blurred as I scanned pages of legalese. Indemnification, force majeure, termination rights. It felt like searching for a needle in a haystack of needles. Doubt started to creep in. Had I imagined it? Had it been removed in a renewal cycle years ago? Maybe Weston was right. Maybe I was just an old man yelling at clouds, clinging to a bygone era of business. Then at 9:45 p.m. I found it. It was buried in the Data Governance and Integrity section of the 2018 Enterprise Framework, a document I had helped legal draft after a client dispute regarding billing transparency. Clause 143, Metric Continuity and Alteration. Any material change to performance definitions, success metrics, or reporting methodology that impacts the client's perceived return on investment (ROI) must be submitted in writing and approved by the client no less than 30 days prior to implementation. Retroactive application of new metrics to historical data is strictly prohibited without express written consent from both parties. I leaned back, the leather of my chair groaning. It wasn't just a rule, it was a shield, and Weston had just taken a sledgehammer to it. By applying his value-add velocity score retroactively to my team's past quarters, he hadn't just insulted me. He had technically breached the contract of every single enterprise client we had. If our clients found out that their failure numbers were manufactured by a CFO trying to prove a point, they wouldn't just be mad. They could sue for breach of contract. They could void their agreements penalty-free. Weston had unknowingly handed every client a get-out-of-jail-free card. I didn't smile. This was too serious for smiling. I opened a new folder titled Compliance Audit Private and started dragging files. I took screenshots of Weston's presentation. I downloaded the timestamps of his metric updates. I cross-referenced them with the client lists. I was building a bomb, and I was going to make sure the fuse was short. The invite pinged into my inbox at 8:15 a.m. the next morning, just as I was setting down my coffee. Subject: urgent, performance alignment, next steps. Host: Kyle Weston. Attendees: Adam S. Ellen R. HR. My stomach did a slow roll, but the panic from yesterday was gone. In its place was a cold, hard resolve. He wasn't wasting time. Bringing in Ellen from HR meant one thing: this wasn't a chat. This was the beginning of the end. He was going to put me on a performance improvement plan, PIP, the corporate polite way of saying, you have 30 days to find a new job. I clicked the Zoom link. Weston was already there, leaning back in his expensive ergonomic chair, looking fresh and rested. Ellen looked less comfortable. She was staring at her second monitor, refusing to make eye contact with the camera. Adam, Weston said, skipping the pleasantries. Thanks for jumping on. Look, yesterday was tough, I get that, but we need to move fast. The numbers are what they are, and we need leadership that buys into the new vision. He paused, waiting for me to apologize or beg. When I stayed silent, he continued, his voice taking on that fake empathetic tone that HR seminars teach you. Ellen and I have drafted a performance improvement plan. We're going to need you to sign it today. It outlines the new targets your team needs to hit based on the velocity model. If we don't see a turnaround in 30 days, we'll have to discuss other options. There it was, the threat. I looked directly into the camera lens, imagining I was staring right into his soulless eyes. I won't be signing that, Kyle, I said. My voice was steady, calm. Weston blinked, his smirk faltering for a microsecond. Excuse me, Adam, this isn't optional, this is a directive. It's not a directive, I corrected him. It's a liability. I shared my screen. I didn't put up a flashy PowerPoint. I just put up a PDF of the 2018 Enterprise Framework highlighted in yellow. This is Clause 143 of our Master Service Agreement, I said. I know you haven't read the legacy contracts, Kyle, but I wrote them. This clause explicitly forbids retroactive metric changes without written client consent. Weston squinted at the screen, then laughed, a sharp, dismissive bark. Clause 143, are you serious? Adam, nobody cares about fine print from 5 years ago. This is about operational agility. It's about breach of contract, I cut in, my voice sharpening. You retroactively altered data for 22 enterprise clients yesterday. You presented that data as fact. If I sign your PIP, I am acknowledging that your metrics are valid. They aren't. They are illegal under the terms of our agreements. I saw Ellen's head snap up. The word illegal tends to wake HR directors up very quickly. Ellen, I said, shifting my focus to her. If we enforce these metrics to fire staff or alter client reporting, we are opening the company up to litigation from our top 10 revenue sources. Are you prepared to document that risk? Weston slammed his hand on his desk. This is ridiculous. It's a technicality, Adam. I'm the CFO. I decide how we measure success. You can decide the future, Kyle, I said softly, but you can't rewrite the past, not without permission. The silence that followed was heavy, transmitting clearly even over the digital connection. Weston's face had flushed a blotchy red. He looked like a child who had been told he couldn't eat his dessert before dinner, petulant and dangerous. We'll figure this out internally, Weston snapped, his smooth corporate mask slipping to reveal the bully underneath. Unshare your screen, Adam. I did, but the damage was done. Ellen was typing furiously on her keyboard, likely messaging the general counsel. Here is what's going to happen, Weston said, his voice dropping to a menacing low. You are going to keep your mouth shut about this clause. I will have legal review it and we will issue a clarification. But if I hear you whispering to clients about breaches of contract, I will fire you for cause. Do you understand me? Insubordination is not protected by a contract. He ended the meeting before I could respond. The screen went black. He thought he could bully me into silence. He thought he could bury Clause 143 in a legal review that would take months, by which time I'd be gone and the metrics would be normalized. He was wrong. I didn't whisper to clients. I didn't need to. I did something far more effective. I did my job. As the senior client success manager, I was the administrator for the client health dashboard, the automated system that tracked contract compliance. It was a system I had helped design, one that Weston clearly didn't understand. I opened the dashboard admin panel. I navigated to the compliance triggers setting. I simply checked a box that said enforce legacy MSA terms. It was a passive action. I wasn't sending emails. I was just telling the system to check the math against the contracts. 10 minutes later, the chaos began. My phone started buzzing, then the office line, then the emails. Automated alert. Compliance failure, account 894, Tech Global, automated alert. Compliance failure, account 223, Omnicorp. The system, now realizing that the reporting data, Weston's new numbers, didn't match the contractual requirements, Clause 143, was automatically flagging accounts as at risk. But here was the kicker. When an account is flagged as at risk due to a compliance breach, the system automatically sends a notification not just to me, but to the legal department and the external audit committee of the board. Weston had tried to keep this in a silo. I had just broadcast it to the people who could fire him. I walked out of my office and toward the coffee machine. The atmosphere on the floor had shifted. The sales team was clustering in small groups looking at their phones. I saw Ellen from HR power walking toward the general counsel's office, clutching a stack of papers, her face pale. Weston's door flew open. He stood in the doorway staring across the bullpen at me. He looked frantic. His tie was slightly askew. He knew the automated alerts were hitting the board's inbox right now. He pointed a finger at me, opening his mouth to shout something, but stopped. He realized that screaming at the quiet guy in the middle of a crisis he caused would only make him look more unstable. I took a sip of my coffee and met his gaze. I didn't flinch. The investigation wasn't just a threat anymore. It was live, and Weston was about to learn that transparency works both ways. The summons came 2 hours later. It wasn't an email this time. It was a personal visit from the general counsel's assistant, a woman who looked like she hadn't blinked in 40 minutes. "The board is convening an emergency session," she said, her voice hushed. "They need you in the main conference room. Now." I walked down the hall, my notepad in hand. I didn't bring a laptop. I didn't need slides. I had the truth. The main conference room was a glass-walled aquarium at the center of the office, usually reserved for closing million-dollar deals. Today, it was a courtroom. The CEO, Marcus, sat at the head of the table. 2 board members were present via a massive video wall, their faces pixelated but stern. The general counsel sat on the right, looking grim. And there was Weston. He was standing, pacing, his jacket off, sweat patches visible under his arms. He looked like a man trying to explain why the car was in the lake. "It's a glitch in the legacy system," Weston was saying, his voice too loud for the acoustic dampening of the room. "Adam is using outdated parameters to trigger false alarms. It's sabotage, Marcus, plain and simple. He's refusing to adapt to the new metrics, so he's breaking the dashboard." Marcus looked up as I entered. "Adam, sit." I took the seat opposite Weston. I didn't look at him, I looked at Marcus. "Is it true?" Marcus asked, his tone tired. "Did you rig the system to flag these accounts?" "I didn't rig anything," I said calmly. "I enabled the compliance check. The system is simply comparing Weston's new value-add velocity metrics against the binding terms of the master service agreements we signed with our clients." Weston slammed his hands on the table. "Those agreements are archaic, we are pivoting." "Pivoting doesn't void a contract, Kyle," I said, my voice cutting through his noise. I turned to the screen, addressing the board members directly. Clause 143 states that we cannot change success metrics retroactively without 30 days notice and written consent. Kyle changed them yesterday, effective immediately for the past 2 quarters. I slid a single piece of paper across the table to the general counsel. "That is the liability estimate," I said. If the clients flagged by the system decide to audit us based on this breach, we are looking at a potential clawback of revenue totaling roughly $4 million. And that's just for this quarter. The silence in the room was absolute. The only sound was the hum of the projector fan. Weston's face went from red to a ghostly white. The figure of $4 million had sucked the oxygen out of his argument. He looked at Marcus, desperate. Marcus, listen, these are aggressive estimates. We can smooth this over, we just need to. Stop, Marcus said. It wasn't a shout, it was a command. Marcus looked at the general counsel. Is Adam right? The lawyer adjusted his glasses, looking at the paper I had provided. The clause is clear, Marcus, and the automated flags are accurate. If we proceed with Kyle's metrics, we are in material breach of contract with 22 major accounts. Adam didn't sabotage the system. He stopped us from driving off a cliff. Weston slumped into his chair. He looked small now. The arrogance, the Ivy League swagger, the buzzwords, it all evaporated under the harsh light of legal reality. He wasn't a visionary anymore. He was a liability. The aftermath wasn't dramatic. There was no security guard dragging Weston out by his ankles. It was quieter than that, which somehow made it more final. Marcus asked everyone but the board and HR to leave the room. As I walked out, Weston was still sitting there, staring at the polished mahogany table, realizing his disruption had just disrupted his own career. By the time I got back to my desk, his calendar had been wiped. His Slack account was deactivated an hour later. An email went out to the company at 4:00 p.m. Kyle Weston has decided to pursue other opportunities effective immediately. The corporate euphemism for "we caught him before he destroyed us." 2 days later, Marcus called me into his office. He looked different, less like the distant figurehead I was used to, and more like a man who had just realized he'd been driving with a blindfold on. "I owe you an apology, Adam," he said. He gestured to the chair, not the visitor's chair, but the one next to his desk where partners sat. "I let the flash of something new blind me to the value of what we already had. You saved us a lot of money and a lot of embarrassment." "I was just doing my job," I said. "That's the problem," Marcus replied. "You were doing a job we weren't appreciating. We need to fix that." He slid a folder across the desk. "We're creating a new role, Director of Operations and Compliance. You won't just be managing clients anymore. You'll be vetting every strategic change this company makes to ensure it actually works. You report directly to me, no more middle management, no more being invisible." I looked at the offer. The salary was a significant jump, the title commanded respect. But more than that, it was the validation. For 10 years, I had told myself that being the quiet, reliable cog was enough. I had convinced myself that I didn't need to be seen. I was wrong. Being seen mattered. Standing up mattered. "I'll take it," I said. The transition took a few weeks. We rolled back the metrics, sent out apologetic but vague updates to the clients about a system calibration error, and stabilized the accounts. My team, the ones Weston had called fat to be trimmed, were the ones who executed the cleanup. They walked with their heads a little higher, knowing that their boss had stared down the C-suite and won. I still come in early, I still leave late sometimes, but the dynamic has changed. When I walk into a meeting now, people don't look through me, they look at me. They know that the quiet guy in the corner isn't just taking notes. He's keeping the whole machine from falling apart. And if anyone ever tries to mess with my team or my contracts again, well, they know exactly where to find me.